Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Look at all these good people at work.
Right?
Stacy, that's it's good to see you back in that place a little bit.
Yes, I'm actually liking it. So it's just easier.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what time David will get on here. He's in Bowling Green. He's going to try to phone in later.
Okay.
Do we need to remind him that the
No, here comes.
the time change may have gotten him?
Good morning, David.
Hey, good morning, Mayor. Hey, Stacy.
Good morning.
Hey, guys, I'm in my car right now. My daughter's down here. I told the mayor yesterday we're in Bowling Green playing a golf tournament. She's playing. I think I'm playing, but some of it got rained out yesterday. She finished, but they had to tee off early this morning. So instead of 11 o'clock tee time, it turned into a 9 o'clock. So I'm gonna be engaged and involved, but I might get out and walk and listen, at some point, depending on how long this goes. So
I think David, you've got that mobility with the phone, and I appreciate you tuning us in. So
well, thank you, Mayor.
You are live and recording and ready to go.
thank you. Let me say, I started to text Connie early this morning, and I ate breakfast instead, Connie. Just to say thank you for being the messenger yesterday and giving me a call.
Welcome. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I would have had breakfast too. If it'd been me.
Good. Stacy, this is actually the committee's meeting, but
Yes.
I saw that you and Andrew had prepared an agenda, just what we would have expected, discussion of the budget and look at the way the budget is prepared for preparation. But it seems like, just if I could cut to the chase and make just for Connie and David's benefit, we went through all the slides in some detail at the last time we were together on Zoom, and we didn't see a lot of value in going through all of those slides again with you. We've got them, and Stacy's ready to do that if you'd like. But since we've seen those slides, it seemed like we could go to the issues that are at hand, that the committee wanted to talk about. And you all have got hopefully you've gotten an email with the presentation of the budget. And again, we can walk through that presentation, or we can just cut right to some of the concerns that the committee has and talk about those. So whichever approach. Connie, I'm not sure if you and David serve as chair or if you all decided to be co-chairs.
We're co-chairs, Mayor. I can start if you want me to, just to kind of reiterate. I had a conversation with Stacy yesterday and with you about some of the concerns we had about doing the firefighters right now. And the other concern that we have is using ARP money for payroll and not having recurring money to take care of that down the road. And that's just a real concern for both of us, actually. But other than that, I mean, our last meeting, we were presented with the raises for the team, which we had just found out about. But I'm on board with that because I think that they're worth their weight in that because of all of the work that they do, and they should be paid accordingly. So I'm down for that right there. So, and then the other thing Stacy did mention to me yesterday was the way that the budget is right this minute, that we're going to take, is it a little over 400,000, Stacy, out of our fund balance to balance it?
Yes, it's about 457,000 right now is what we're showing using reserves.
Okay, so if we backed out the firefighters right now and just did the raises for everybody like we've got them, then we wouldn't have to take anything out of our fund balance, right? We would be zeroed.
The cost of the firefighters is a little over 500,000. So
Okay, that's what I thought. Those are my concerns. David, if you want to chime in.
You said it pretty well, Connie. Stacy, the 4.4 million difference that you show on the one slide, that's probably where I guess I have the biggest concern. And I guess I was looking for ways that we could reduce. It says fund with new debt to 540,000. Can you refresh my memory on what that was? I've looked through here, but
yes, and if Andrew will let me see, I can share my screen. I'm going to pull that slide up that I think you're referring to.
And David, I'm trying to talk you through the screen. It's going to be hard for you to see.
Yeah, I apologize. So I'm just going to, this is kind of the highlight of our budget. This is really where it all comes down on the bottom line.
okay.
Our project, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I've found that I've got that on my computer. I've got to just go through it myself. So we're lined up. Perfect. You're good. Go ahead.
Okay. As I said, just the bottom line of the budget, our projected revenues are 27,699,000. Our
Right.
requested expenditures were 32,106,000. So our difference that we essentially started with was 4,407,240. And as you can see, we've kind of put that into different pots of money. The fund with new debt, the 540,000, that is money that Eddie had put into the budget for Oxford and Lexus Way extension. Those are obviously two very large projects. So for projects of that nature, typically we finance not only the construction costs, but also any engineering cost as well. So that says fund with new debt, meaning when the council is ready to begin those projects and when we're ready to go out to bid for an engineer, we would do one of those resolutions that says we can recover those costs with financing from bond issues. So basically we set aside that expense really for a future debt. There is no new debt in this budget.
And nothing
It's to say
would be
in the
drawn.
future, we would
It's just
recommend.
it's just an allocation or, okay.
Yes, so there's not actually any new debt in this budget, so that may be a little confusing, but that is something that we can fund with debt. So we're pulling it out of the budget. So it's not in there right now. The fund with American Rescue Plan funds, the 2.4 million.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have more detail on that. About 797,000 of that is we've talked about. There is a provision in those guidelines that we can use it for premium pay for essential workers. So we did look at some raises, some of those raises for our fire, police, public works employees could be funded with that over the next 2 to 3 years. We don't know exactly how much money we're getting. There's been numbers from 6 up to 9 million thrown around, but we don't know for sure. But we would spread that money out over probably 2 to 3 budget years. Okay. So we were going to go ahead and make an assessment that in this first year, we're going to allocate about 2.4 million to ARPA, and 797,000 was employee pay, and the rest is some capital community service type organizations, revenue replacement for parks, for P&Z, some of our parks capital expenses, since tourism is one of the things that's under the ARPA guidelines. And as Andrew mentioned, and we have in one of the slides, we'll be bringing you a presentation about ARPA funds once we get all the final details. But we felt it was prudent to go ahead and include that in our budget presentation because we do know the funds are coming, and we want to utilize those as best we can.
I'm good. I understand. the thing that Connie touched on, and I guess the same thought that I have is committing to either additional payroll by personnel or pay increases, which I do support, taking those things to such a level that when the ARPA funding is gone, that we're going to have to figure out how to raise revenue to take care of those expenses. I think for me, and it sounds like for Connie, those are our biggest concerns.
Can I say something? And I was kind of under the impression with the money from our insurance premium tax was going to be the ongoing revenue that we were going to be able to continue to fund our raises and our employees. That was the impression that I had. Is that not a true statement?
That was not only the impression you had, Connie, that's exactly what I said.
Okay, so in essence, if we take that $790-some thousand from ARPA and put that in there for the raises, we just won't be using that money right now from the insurance premium tax, basically, right?
And let me, so I'll do a quick calculation here.
Okay.
As of right now, with the CERS increases, we've talked about the CERS rates are increasing next year. Plus the portion of raises that we've allocated to current revenue and the positions that we recommended adding, we're at $2,194,000. And our insurance premium tax revenue, compared to the current year budget, we had it bringing in about 2.2 million additional.
Okay.
So even without the 797 that right now we have in the ARPA bucket, we're almost at that 2.2 million between CERS increases, the non-essential employees' salary increases, and the new positions that had been recommended and requested. So we are using, even though insurance premium taxes are general revenue, obviously we can choose to use them however, we do have nearly 2.2 million. And then if you add the portion that is sitting in ARPA right now, our new personnel and salary costs that we had recommended in this budget are 2.9 million. So they're nearly $3 million.
I want to add to that I would urge everyone not to think of ARPA money in terms of ARPA is going to pay for this, and that's a eligible use of ARPA, and therefore it's appropriate. I mean, we do have to do that analysis. We have to determine what we can fund with ARPA, but it's much easier, and I think it's much clearer to see it as an addition to our budget. It's an addition to our overall budget. I mean, I don't want us to get tripped up necessarily on, well, ARPA is going to fund this. And I think that long term, we need to be mindful of, what that's going to fund. I think ultimately it's all about the bottom line of the budget. I completely agree with you, David, that you have, it specifically says in some of the national guidance, be mindful of paying for things with ARPA that are going to be continuing expenses. I respect that, but in terms of the overall budget picture, it's an addition of $6.5 to $9 million of money in our budget, which will go away in 4 years. I think it's just easier to view it that way rather than to necessarily get caught up in what individual things it's funding. Does that make sense? It's a little bit of a nuanced argument.
Yeah, but I've still got the concern, just to lay it out, kind of plain and simple, that if we hire, 5 new firefighters this coming year and 5 the year after that and 5 the year after that, that's making a pretty bold commitment to a new station. And without having the additional revenue to cover that and the manpower, that's the biggest concern I think I have with all this right now.
David,
So
can
for
I?
me, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I want to address that. For planning purposes, for financial projection purposes, we gave you 5 years of what we think will happen. And in that 5-year plan, we showed 3 years, you're correct, of adding 5 firefighters and 5 police officers each year. I know, and I've mentioned to you all as a committee that there are real questions about the 5 additional firemen that we have in the plan for years 2 and 3, because those are really dependent on the next station. And I think the additional firefighters that we will vote on in the next year's budget, those are something I knew we would discuss and debate, and those may not happen. I didn't think there was any question about the 5 firefighters for this year that are funded this coming budget year and Connie into the future with the proceeds equivalent to what the insurance premium tax are. I knew that there was a real debate about the commitment for another fire station in years 2 and 3 of this plan. Another budget will address those, David. This one doesn't address those, and we do
I
have
got
the 500.
Okay. I got you.
It
Well,
was- when we presented that, the mayor's right, I'm just going to expand on it a little bit. When we presented that 5-year plan, we assumed that the insurance premium tax increase essentially would cover the raises and the new positions, the 5, and the 2, fire, police, and public works. And they do. I think that's what Stacy was just getting at. And I think we also either explicitly or implicitly acknowledge that the new positions in years 2 and 3 were dependent on additional revenue.
okay.
Not temporary, not ARPA revenue, but an additional revenue source. I think we've made that clear from the very start.
Okay.
And my recent comments, David, were to let the council know that if we go to the very end of our 5-year projections and include all of the things that we've put in there, it required ultimately for $8 million in additional revenue. And I pointed out to the council that you've already achieved $3.7 million of that, but
Right.
that does leave the other revenue increase that we all acknowledge has to happen at some point. And
Yeah.
your all's concern is about the timing of some of these improvements to staff. So that's why I thought it was right for discussion this morning.
Okay. And Mayor, you and I talked a little bit yesterday, and one of the things that was new to us at the last finance meeting, I guess it was last week, were the raises, to some of our key personnel, and that's something that we support, but that's a big step, but pretty bold amounts. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got to make a decision, and I appreciate your position on it, and certainly how you're presenting it and explaining it. I'm still not personally comfortable at this moment. I'm not saying I wouldn't be in 6 months. I mean, it's not like we have to have a specific timeline to make this decision. I mean, we can see how things go over the next few months. I'm just speaking for myself.
Sure.
I could get comfortable with this thing in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, depending on what we're forecasting, what we anticipate. I just feel like with the gross receipts tax where it is, and not yet having the stormwater in place, some of those things, and we've made obviously huge strides. I'm just not real comfortable adding the additional people at this time. I'm good. I want, the most important thing to me, and I feel like to the firefighters, is getting their pay taken care of. And that's the commitment I made to the chief. And I think he clearly understood where I was coming from in some of our prior conversations, that was my number one commitment. And that for me, the personnel would come in time, but I'm just not real comfortable doing it at this time, respectfully.
Okay. David, to address the salary issue, I acknowledge for all the audience watching, and I will highlight this in our budget presentation, that we do have some management salaries that I'm asking the council to increase substantially. You're correct. And I will highlight that and make it a part of our presentation, because council and the public need to see what those salaries that I'm asking for are. I think I'm comfortable doing that because I know what the market is, and I know the experience and the caliber of our people. It will, some people will gasp, and that's why we need to draw attention to it and make sure that we're very transparent about that. So
Mayor, you're right. Yeah, they will, and I support it. Even, although it was, and it's fine. I mean, it has to be presented sometime, whether it was last week or last month or last year. It's just reality, and I get it. I feel like you've got a well-oiled machine down there, and we want to keep the team working together and moving forward. I think, gosh, they've done an outstanding job. So I'm in full support of that, Mayor.
I am too, Mayor.
It's bold. It's bold. I know that.
Yeah.
I acknowledge that's tough for you guys, and I appreciate your willingness to consider those.
Well, where do you all want to go from here in terms of the budget, Mayor? I mean, I know you and I chatted a little bit yesterday. Do you have a thought today, or do we need to all think about it a little bit more over the weekend? And I'm not at all trying to call this meeting short at the moment, even though I've got somewhere I'm going to walk to here in a few minutes. But do you all have a thought on, on how we proceed from here?
Yeah, given the how late the date is, I think we probably need to reconsider our timeline. Unless I think we've got options, David. We can go ahead and present the budget as we prepared it, because it technically is the mayor is responsible for presenting a budget.
Correct.
By statute. So,
yeah.
And I think that I really believe we've got a pretty thoughtful budget that our thinking is very closely aligned on, but some timing of things are a little different.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I don't think we're that, you were right yesterday, David. We're not that far apart. We just have a disagreement on some timing. And my position is I feel as though that I've made a real commitment to the public and the council. It's the way I presented the tax increase that I presented for the insurance premium tax and what the use would be. And I think I created that expectation. So I think I have an obligation to present the budget the way we've prepared it.
Okay.
And then David, we the council can have option 1 and 1A, or there can be another column. How we technically do that, I don't know, but I respect the committee's thinking. But I feel that I have made commitments that are so strong that I need to present the budget as it is. So Andrew, Stacy, do you all have a technical suggestion, or should we circle back Monday morning and just?
I mean, as far as technical and as far as preparation goes, from my standpoint, obviously, like you said, if we present the mayor's proposed budget on Monday, we have 2 weeks until first reading of the ordinance. The ordinance is what dictates, obviously, what's going to actually be adopted. So at that point, if the rest of council is feeling similar to David and Connie, it's been a long time, but in the past we have had that third column in the front of, we have department requested, mayor's proposed, and then there's always that council approved column that can be added. if council so chooses to make edits, and whether we do that in a, we haven't had a budget workshop in a while, those are options, or we can reconvene the finance committee at any time and come up with those final decisions either Monday morning or immediately after presentation, either way.
Okay.
Reconvene the finance committee for some, because obviously David and Connie typically sponsor that ordinance. So it does have their names on it usually, since we have council members sponsoring, so we can reconvene the finance committee after presentation if we want to work out those final details for the ordinance.
Okay. I've seen it happen in a multitude of ways. Some of them have been kind of crazy, and I'm not advocating for that at all. We'll get through it. We'll work it out. And, I just feel like maybe there'd be minor changes on the timing.
Stacy, you remember you were talking about Robert was putting a couple of his employees into another bucket because he was having a hard time hiring people right now. Is there a way that we can move the fire people to a bucket for future down the road?
The two public works employees are in the $1 million deferred number. And that's obviously deferred to a mid-year amendment, deferred to a future year budget, whatever. That would be for council to take an action on outside of this budget process. That $1 million worth of items is something council will take action on later in the future. That obviously that's something we will have to work out amongst ourselves in this finance committee scenario.
Okay.
I mean, obviously anything's possible, but that's.
But it seems to me, Connie, the answer to that would probably be yes. If it was deferred for funding, that's really what we're talking about.
And by default, the way we chose to sort of look at this, I mean, it's all just for illustrative purposes, but the way we chose to look at this was everything that was requested that didn't get put into one of the other three buckets just goes into the deferred column. Because what we determined was we didn't think that any of the requests were something we were never going to fund.
Right.
So by default, it's going to fall to that category.
All right.
So we'll feel our way through it. But it is awkward. I'm going to be presenting a budget that doesn't have any sponsors.
Well, we can sponsor it. I mean, that's not a problem. I mean, it's a formality to do that. It doesn't mean you have to, vote for it.
You're exactly right. If y'all are willing to do that, then we can certainly move the discussion to the council.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, and if we need to circle back Monday, I'm happy to do it with you. But I know that we kind of know where we stand, and we just work our way through the process. So I'm willing to turn everybody loose this morning. Unless, Andrew, any perspective or anything you want to add, or I think we've got everything on the table.
I think we need to have some internal conversations here, but I think you're right. I think we've sort of landed on where we're going to land. But I mean, I want to acknowledge that we put this budget together with guiding principles in mind. But a lot of the way that we chose to structure things, where do things go in what bucket, was sort of just by choice. In other words, there's a great deal of flexibility in terms of what went into what bucket, particularly with that ARPA money. And that number, $2.4 million, is just plucked out of thin air, because we don't know until Monday what that bigger number is. I mean, that could be $9.7 million, in which case $2.4 million is on the low end of what we could budget. That could be another $1 million to throw in there to fund things. I realize that using all the principles we talked about, it may not be a difference, but what we put in funded by debt. It was driven by, well, what are capital projects that are long-term, but there's flexibility there. But we kind of landed, Stacy and I, after, going around and around about it, on how much should sort of land at the bottom line of each column, and then went from there. Which is simply me restating what I was restating earlier. Don't necessarily get tripped up on what goes into that column, because it can be rearranged quite easily. And I think that if that is what is necessarily tripping us up, I think we ought to revisit that.
Andrew, I do have a question about the ARPA money. You may have said this, I'm not sure, but do we have to spend it? If we don't spend it, is it taken away?
It's gone. If we
Okay,
don't spend it by December 31st of 2024, it's gone.
okay. And it's broad. We can get in more into that once we get the money. It's broad as to how we can use it, right?
We will know Monday.
Okay,
You're told we will know Monday exactly how much
Okay.
we get and exactly what we can spend it on.
okay.
Yeah.
Looks like David's walking, Mayor.
He is, and Connie, I just wanted to forward that we lose David. We included a step for you all this year that you've not seen before, and I think it threw you off balance. Stacy and I have always dealt with the gap, but we just closed the gap, and then we showed you the budget. This year, for the first time, we showed you what the gap was and the struggle to balance the budget from the gap. And we came up with the bucket. So you've never seen that step before of the gap and how we close it. So that's part, I think, of what threw you off balance this year. But I'll let you go. And David, thank you for in vacation, calling in with us.
Thanks. I'll
Mayor,
talk to you later.
thank you all. All right.
Mayor,
Thank
thanks.
you all.
I appreciate you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Stacy and Andrew, for everything
Welcome.
you guys
Thank
do. I didn't mean to throw a screw into anything, but
We're good.